The year is 1959, and a new decade has brought with it hopes for progress, prosperity, and peace. As the Cold War deepens, the threat of nuclear war looms over Europe, which might seem like an odd backdrop to a chilling tale of tragedy in the wilderness. But our story starts here with the impending specter of annihilation hanging over humanity. Perhaps its greatest atrocity would be the needless loss of life. And that's what makes the story we're about to tell you today all the more tragic. On January 27th, a group of 9 friends set out across the vast expanse of the northern Ural Mountains. They were a tight-knit bunch, a mix of men and women who were all students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Their average age was just 23. Their group was led by 23-year-old engineering student Igor Dyatlov. With them were Yuri Krivonishenko, Zina Kolyada, Rustam Sloboda, Ludmila Dubinina, Yuri Dorochenko, Yekaterina, and Nikolai Thibault, and finally Semyon Zolotarev. The group consisted of talented young athletes, experienced hikers, and even a doctor. None of them were strangers to the outdoors. In fact, they hiked together regularly, covering dozens of kilometers every week. So when they planned their trip to the remote peak of Mount Otorten, which translates to Mountain of the Dead in the local Mansi language, they were confident that they were ready. It wasn't just a routine expedition, it was their biggest challenge yet. Rated Grade 3, the most difficult rating possible without entering territory that was beyond human capability. 100 kilometers into the wilderness, with almost no previous expeditions having ever attempted the route before. But the group knew they were prepared. Their journey started on January when they left the town of Avidel. According to plan, they would hike for several days until they reached their destination, Mount Otorten. On February 1st, they arrived on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, aka Mountain of the Dead, and it was there that they decided to pitch their tent. Why they chose to do so in the open, rather than descend into a forested area that would have provided shelter, is unknown. And the implications of that decision would become chillingly clear in the days to come. That evening, something strange and terrifying occurred. It would defy explanation and baffle investigators for decades. The group never made their scheduled return. And on February 20th, a search party was organized. When they arrived at the tent site, what they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. The tent had been torn open from the inside and showed signs of a struggle. Footprints led away from the tent, through the knee-deep snow, and down the mountainside. It was clear that the hikers had evacuated the tent and fled. But why? And where were they going? The prints in the snow were disturbing. All 9 members of the group were barefoot and wearing very little clothing. Outside temperatures hovered around negative 30 degrees Celsius, well below freezing. Something must have driven the group to abandon their tent and belongings in the middle of the night, desperate to escape whatever had been inside. The searchers continued their trek down the mountain, hoping to find the group and bring them back to safety. But what they found instead was the frozen corpses of 2 of the hikers. They were huddled together near a tree and dressed only in their underwear. Next to them lay the remains of a small fire, suggesting that they had done everything they could to keep themselves warm before succumbing to the cold. Nearby, branches were broken, as if someone had tried desperately to climb them or flee. It was already clear that these hikers hadn't died from exposure. So what could have driven them to strip naked and abandon their tent? Over the next few days, the bodies of the remaining 5 hikers were found scattered between the tent and the tree. Some of them appeared to be trying to crawl back to the tent. But the most shocking discovery came 2 months later, when the snow in the area melted. 4 more bodies were buried under a debris pile in a ravine. 2 of them belonged to women. The case was investigated thoroughly by the Soviet authorities, but they failed to find any evidence of foul play or malicious intent. The group had suffered massive internal injuries, fractured skulls, broken ribs, but there were no external wounds and no signs of struggle. One victim, Ludmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. Another, Yuri Krivonishenko, had crushed ribs that looked like they had been caused by a car crash, but there was no traffic on the road, and none of the bodies showed signs of defensive wounds. They'd been ambushed by wild animals, fallen victim to an unknown attacker. Had they been murdered by one of their own? The possibilities seemed endless. In the end, the Soviet investigation concluded that the cause of death was a compelling natural force, a finding that satisfied no one. The case remained open and various theories began to take hold in public consciousness. Was it an avalanche? The slope where the group set up their tent was too shallow for an avalanche, and no clear signs of one were ever found. Did they suffer from paradoxical undressing? While a rare symptom of hypothermia, this did not explain the internal trauma. Is it military testing? Some believe that the group stumbled upon a secret Soviet experiment. Radiation was found on some of the clothes, but nothing concrete could be proven. And then there were the UFO theories. Lights in the sky were reported that night by nearby hikers. Could something extraterrestrial have been responsible? But the most sinister theories pointed the finger at the local Mansi people. Were the hikers murdered in a ritualistic attack? Investigators found no signs of hostility or cannibalism among the group, and they dismissed the possibility. The Dyatlov incident became a source of morbid fascination for many. It inspired books, documentaries, podcasts, and even horror films. But the truth is, the most frightening aspect of the tragedy was the sheer mystery surrounding it. We still don't know what happened on that fateful night. What we do know is that 9 young lives were lost, frozen in time on a remote mountainside. Today, the site is known as Dyatlov Pass, and the legacy of the tragedy continues to haunt the minds of those who visit. Here are a few questions that remain unanswered. Why did the group decide to pitch their tent in the open, exposed to the elements, rather than seeking shelter in the nearby forest? Why did they flee their tent in the middle of the night? What caused the hikers' bizarre injuries? Finally, what exactly was the compelling natural force mentioned in the official report? Now, let's delve into some of the prevailing theories. First, the avalanche theory. An avalanche could certainly explain why the tent was torn apart and why the hikers abandoned it in terror. However, there's no evidence of one, and the slope was too shallow for such a phenomenon. Then we have the paradoxical undressing theory. This occurs when a person suffering from hypothermia removes their clothing, believing it will help them cool down. But this doesn't explain the internal injuries. Next, the military testing theory. This is plausible given the radiation found on some of the clothes. However, there's no concrete proof of any experiment. Finally, the UFO theory. While intriguing, it's not supported by any substantial evidence. It remains one of the strangest mysteries of the 20th century. For decades, investigators and enthusiasts have searched for answers, but the truth is, we may never know what happened to the Dyatlov group. The mountains of northern Russia hold their secrets close, and the mystery only adds to the tragedy. What do you think happened to the Dyatlov group? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of mystery and intrigue. Stay curious and stay safe.